Society is a complex notion. It's how we organize our communities, how we share opportunities and threats, and how we define who we are. It's a reflection of our values. In Asia, the societies are more communal, more collaborative, and cooperative than other parts of the world. There are thousands of years of trade and cultural links to build upon. I think sharing and just getting along is in our DNA. And so many political and business leaders from Asia focus on connections that are mutually beneficial. This is why ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and the AEC, the Asian Economic Community, make sense. They reflect on Asian belief in the power of sharing and connectedness.
ASEAN is a collection of 10 member states in Southeast Asia. It's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, beginning with Brunei, Cambodia, Myanmar, Laos, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, plus 3. The 3 countries are important countries to us, next to us, adjacent to us, in the East. China, Japan, Korea. And we have formed this since 1997 when the Asian financial crisis came to Southeast Asia first, to Thailand actually, and then it spread out into the Southeast Asian and East Asian landscape. We decided that we have been more integrated, more connected with each other than we thought we were. So we should have an architecture of cooperation among ourselves. It became ASEAN plus 3. We are working on a community for the region by the year 2015. Combined GDP is 2 trillion. We are trading with the world about 2 trillion plus, and the population is 600 million. So it's sizable, and we are major trading partners and investment destinations for many countries, many dialogue partners, including the EU, the US, Japan, China, Korea, Australia.
We are bound together by being in the same region, and now we're going to cooperate together by having less regulation when it comes to labor, so that people and goods can move more freely. So I think that this is the best. I mean, and we won't share a currency, so why not?
ASEAN really is an attempt by these 10 Asian nations to really come together. And really they have. But the reality is that ASEAN has to do so much more to really come together economically, culturally, and politically. One of the things that ASEAN is doing to its great credit is trying to create an ASEAN economic community. You know, in the next 2 years, these nations will really have to be thinking through, can they really work together? Can they work together politically? Can they work together culturally? Can they work together economically? ASEAN is so diverse, and that's one of the challenges, but my hope is that given the diversity of ASEAN, they'll also find great strengths in that diversity.
The strength of ASEAN in the past is that they were united in economic objectives of prosperity. The weakness of the ASEAN group is precisely that they are so diverse. You have small countries, you have bigger countries. You have countries which have very low incomes. You have countries which are middle to high and even high incomes like a Singapore. You have countries which are aligned very much with what I call Western beliefs and cultures and values. And you have others who I would call much more regional, and some would say even much more sympathetic to the Chinese views of the region and the world. So you have this tremendous diversity. And because of this diversity, ASEAN has also tried to be what I would call relatively neutral. They've never tried to force anyone to take a position. For this past decades, for example, they've been unwilling to put a lot of pressure on Myanmar in an overt fashion. They would talk to them under the table or behind the scenes, but they would not want to come out with a big declaration saying, Myanmar, you've got to open up, you've got to reform. So they've been very careful in terms of the neutrality. Now that principle of neutrality, of impartiality, also means that ASEAN has a very difficult time dealing with contentious issues where there isn't a general uniform agreement. And many of these, what I call politically tinged or economically politically tinged issues, it's going to be very hard to get a unanimous view. So I think ASEAN does have this problem in being able to take a strong position on some of the more contentious issues. And many of these involve the role of China in the region. And that's why I think this kind of interplay is going to be stalemated for a while.
Korea has, of course, these set of free trade agreements with the United States, with the EU, and of course ASEAN, which is the major association of economies in this area. That doesn't only help other industries, but also the tourism, MICE industry in particular also. Not so much because of restrictions that were there before that have been taken away or so, but because tourism in itself, as the economy kind of develops, becomes a more important sector for people. As people have more wealth and have more money to spend and time to spend, they tend to do more tourism, and that's definitely true in all of the Asian countries.
I think ASEAN as a region really has extraordinary economic potential, both for themselves and for all the nations that would like to partner with them. From the United States perspective, we really think about this realistically. Southeast Asia is going to form, once they become an economic community in a few years, an extraordinarily large market. They are going to have citizens who are increasingly able and ready as they grow economically, it's a fast-growing region economically, to purchase American goods and American services, to travel to America.
I think they welcome what I would call a stronger or more enhanced U.S. presence. It gives them a comfort blanket. It creates a balance. It allows potential for more neutrality. And many would also say it's not that we don't think China's rising is good for the region, or that China rising means it shouldn't have some kind of a greater role in the region than it used to have. But that role should not be at the expense of our own interests. Our own interests are broader. So I think everyone would say we welcome a greater U.S. presence. Now, if you talk to the Chinese, many would say actually the same thing. They actually would welcome what I would call a balanced and enhanced U.S. role in Asia, because they realize that it provides a comfort blanket for others. Therefore, it actually gives the Chinese a little bit more room to grow without appear as threatening as it is in the minds of some of the leaders in Southeast Asia or Southeast Asia these days. So I think a greater U.S. presence in a balanced role, recognition that that role must recognize that China is a rising power and therefore needs to figure out what that means, is something that everyone welcomes.
Japan's role, trying to promote this free trade area of Asia-Pacific as a whole, I think would be one we would like to do with the United States together as an important partner of rulemaking in this area.
The United States has never left Asia to begin with, right? It's been always here. The fact that the United States has been paying much more attention on the Middle East does not make us say that United States left this country or this region for that matter. I think that what the United States is going to do for the next 3 to 5 years is to strengthen what is already strong U.S.-Japan relations in order to check and balance rising China. On the other hand, the United States will be pretty much strengthening its relationship with South Korea as well. But here is the problem though. Because China is the largest trading partner both to Japan and South Korea. So from the Chinese vintage point of view, they might say this: you're making money from us, but you're still treating like a threat. So then Japan and South Korea has this problem. But from Pyongyang's point of view, it is the only option to bring the United States back to the table for negotiation.
Groupings are very important. They help to improve overall relations. I mean, Asia is a very complex region with many issues. The big risk, obviously, is of a political nature as well. If economic integration and cooperation is not sufficiently supported, then private sector-led investment and improvements in governance will come to a halt. So all this is subject to a continuous political, peaceful, collaborative understanding, where the benefits of cooperation are seen as being more important than old rivalry of the past. I was just at a meeting with China, Korea, and Japan executives against the backdrop of current issues in the South Chinese Ocean, where political emotions run very high over rocks. Or some people, of course, argue there may be more behind it. And the truth is that the corporate world has every interest in maintaining an open and good collaborative engagement across all countries. At the same time, people and their respective leadership still is trying to catch up with the past, and there's strategic rivalry going on as China is rising. The question is, what is its place in the world, and so forth. So the political security dimension is of utmost importance, and the peaceful future development of the region as a whole is critical for economic growth and development.
Not all the ASEAN countries have the same interests. Some have very strong interests. The Philippines have very strong interests. Vietnam has a very strong interest. Others don't have any direct interest in terms of the resources, but they have interest in terms of the waterways and movement. Others have a strong interest in the sense of keeping some kind of ASEAN unity. So they have a bit of a tension right now, because some among them have a very strong view in terms of trying to establish a broader view, a view which is supportive of their interest. Others basically don't have or are not pushed to such a role. Now, China's position has been weakened by the fact it is seen as such a big player. It would like to do and negotiate and talk about the issue in terms of bilateral discussions. But everyone realizes that a bilateral discussion between China and any specific country is not a fair discussion. So they would argue that they need a more multinational approach. They'd be very happy to have the U.S. involved in some way. China obviously does not want such an involvement. Now, I think the Chinese leadership also realized that their claims against this whole area in the South China Sea, most of them would say it's not that we would like or we believe that we have rights to the whole area, but they would say we have substantive rights or a lot of rights, undefined. So I don't know how you're going to get around this area, because China has basically established this principle. Let's talk about it bilaterally, not multilaterally. But most of the ASEAN countries are saying we need to look at this as a group. So you have a bit of a stalemate over here, and I don't know how that stalemate is going to break out.
China will be a very compelling, by far going to be the most compelling economic story in the world, is going to be the Chinese growth story. Even though the U.S. will be in many ways a more attractive market to be in for the long term, China will be the more compelling story. And in Asia, the attraction of the economic pull from China will be overwhelming. So any country in Asia, if it has the ability to benefit from Chinese economic largesse, will do so. So, you know, to say that these countries in ASEAN are going to be able to really move away from China's really speaks against everything that's going to be happening economically in this part of the world. The question will be, how well will they be able to have their own type of development in a way that they consider to be useful and independent of China, given that Chinese influence over them economically and therefore politically will be vastly greater.
We view on two things, that is Asia as a partner, and second as a long-standing, long-serving partner. So that means that we don't really look those countries as only manufacturer or consumer. It is a partner, so we will enjoy partnership in asking them to manufacture together with us, and division of labor in a way, and also as a consumer where they would import Japanese goods but more now. Japanese would supply parts, and then they would assemble or make a final product from some of our parts. That's the pattern of trade now.
Myanmar has been left behind, has been closing the door for 50 years. So from now on, we just open the door. We're just inviting all the foreign investment to be in our country. So in 5 years, 10 years down the road, I think we should contribute a lot of things. We can be a pillar of the ASEAN development also, because a lot of interest, a lot of focus, a lot of interest has been given by the whole world that Myanmar is start opening. So we might be able to contribute a lot to the ASEAN. After AEC, also we can contribute a lot in every sectors. The disparity, I think, exists. Since we closed the door for 50 years, there's a developing country already among the ASEAN, like Singapore, Malaysia, well developed. And the other, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, also in the developing. And then we are just an emerging country. So the disparity will keep us lag behind the competition among the ASEAN members, I think.
In the last few years, we've even seen more and more free trade agreements proposed or signed between the nations of Southeast Asia as a whole, between the Association of Southeast Asia and, say, European countries. There have been free trade agreements between Australia and New Zealand and ASEAN. There have also been free trade agreements between Korea and the ASEAN region. As ASEAN moves forward, trade will be increasingly important to them as their economies continue to grow and develop.
If you look back at the history, growth in human history, civilization comes from the interaction of cultures. It comes from taking an idea in one culture and then expressing it in a new culture. It takes the idea such as the printing press that was developed for the Chinese language, and then suddenly you're writing books in Latin. It takes the ideas of making maps in one country, using them in another country, using one religion and transferring it to a new ground. And in a new ground, it grows in a different way, and it blooms in a different way. Throughout history, all civilization has been advanced through meeting of people. When people are in isolation, they wither, they die. You leave a person alone by themselves on the steppe, they will soon be gone. It's through human interaction that we are humans. And Asia and Europe are the two greatest civilizations of world history. Their coming together has helped to create this modern world. Their continuing to work together can create a future that overcomes some of the past problems that the Asians and the Europeans and the other people of the world have created.
Asia is changing. It's growing, expanding, and exploding. Sometimes there are just not enough adjectives to describe the monumental transformation. But Asia is not just about numbers. Behind the headlines are people, everyday people. They are living, they are enjoying the process and wondering what it'll mean to them. And this is a good question for everyone to ask, since the changes in Asia won't just affect people in Thailand or Malaysia, China, or Japan. No, the changes will impact everyone in the world. And that's exciting. Yes, it means planet Earth will be a different place in a few years, and yes, it means we will face challenges ahead. But I am optimistic, and I am excited as you watch more in our series, and I think you will be as well.
Asia is rising, but it doesn't mean that there aren't persistent challenges to Asia's growth. From poor infrastructure to burgeoning populations to really, the challenges of people demanding for freer economies, the opportunity to speak up more. These challenges persist in Asia. I'm confident, though, that the leaders of Asia will really do what's right to move their region forward.
I think it's a real opportunity. I think as the more developed parts of ASEAN continue to grow, that naturally spills over. You will see opportunities. It's a good influence, the connectivity, but it's important to all of us, and it's an opportunity we shouldn't miss.
Asia's in a really, really good place for the next explosion of growth.
This is Asia's time. This is Asia Rising.